Hi there, this is SJ Thomason, and I am really excited today because we're going to be talking about atheist street epistemology. And we have lots of samples that we've listened to of atheists who go out into the streets and they practice what they call street epistemology. And what that is, and I see the definition here, it's a conversational tool that helps people reflect on the reliability of the methods used to arrive at their deeply held beliefs. Now that's code for going out, oftentimes on bikes or with webcams strapped to your head, out into the streets, and a lot of times onto college campuses where you encounter people and then you ask them about their beliefs and you start drilling into them a little bit. And the next thing you know, they decide they're going to turn into
atheists. The next thing you know, well, lo and behold, I don't believe in God anymore. How'd that happen?
It's like, so I am here right now with Craig Reed and with Dunstan. And so far, we've also got Andrew Statelites, who's supposed to join us in a little bit. So we're going to have a little chat about this. And so let me go ahead and bring it over to Craig, and then we'll go to Dunstan to introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Craig Reed. I have a channel, Craig Reed TCR. And I did a prelude video to this particular stream that we're about to do, where I talk a little bit about street epistemology and the different approaches. And I watched an interview with Anthony Magnabosco, who is, for all intents and purposes, the leading light, the foremost practitioner of the art form known as street epistemology. And I guess that's about it.
Yeah, so you've heard, and so yes, Anthony Magnabosco, he's one of the ones who I've gone to his channel and I've listened to him and watched his featured videos. And so, and he actually goes to conferences and speaks about how to do this.
So, well, his version, should I just tell a little about his version versus others? Because I go into this a little.
And then we'll go over to Dunstan.
His version is a much, I said there are some other people who do it where God doesn't exist is the foregone conclusion. And then they ask you questions to basically try to lead you to that foregone conclusion. I don't think his is quite that, I think, I'm not sure, so we'll discuss it, but I think his is more just trying to get at the mechanics of your actual belief. And if you kind of deconvert in the process, okay, all the better. I don't know. A question I asked in my video, and I don't know if you guys know the answer, but does he post every video that he has about 3 interviews he posts like every 2 or 3 days? Is he interviewing people and not posting videos where they storm off, or is he posting everything he does? Do you know?
Oh, that is a great question. I would have to imagine that some people do storm off.
Well, I don't think they do, because I think when he encounters resistance, now I don't know this for a fact. I've watched about 10 of his videos and I watch about half of them. I've never really, I'm going to go into it more, but I think when he encounters resistance, he slows down, regroups, softens his tone, goes, okay, man, well, okay, so you don't feel like that, and I think he just keeps going and asking questions in a softer way. I don't think he actually challenges, but I'm not sure. So.
It sounds like have any of y'all seen that show called The Pickup Artist?
Oh, that's really old, a long time ago.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like that. These lines to try to attract people on a superficial level.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, I'm looking at the chat. I see some funny stuff like street epistemology is a euphemism for atheist proselytizing.
Well,
we've got somebody be nice, because G-Man has a wrench and he has the ability to rid us of you in this channel if you're going to say some really rude things like you are. So
to silence you.
Yes, G-Man has that ability. I've given him the famous wrench. So so let's go into okay, so let's talk about this street epistemology. Do you guys think that it is having an impact on people? If you picture yourselves when you were in college, and I don't know, I think Craig, you were sort of a very weak Christian, if you were even a Christian. You might have been an agnostic.
No, I was an agnostic in college. I wasn't Christian at all.
And
I was raised Roman Catholic, but only nominally. Like, nobody expected me to go to church and actually believe any of the beliefs. They would have been really surprised if I had, actually. It was more a culture thing. Go to church at Christmas and Easter.
Yeah, so you're a creaster.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then I totally understand that because many years of my life I was a creaster too. So I get that completely. But if I had been approached when I was just a creaster and I was approached by somebody who asked me how I came to my beliefs, I might have been a bit jarred. What do you guys think? I mean, if you're in college, you really hadn't developed much of your belief system at
Yeah.
all at that point.
Yeah, I think it kind of is effective because people really don't have a philosophical background to be able to discern what they're being, being proselytized to about. So I think, it will get a lot of people, start to question or start to look at their beliefs, but of course once they look more into the foundations of their belief of Christianity, that's when they can go back to theism. As you know, there's a long tradition of the history of philosophy going back to Aristotle and the Stoics, Aquinas, that Christianity, philosophy, has a rich theistic tradition. But at the superficial level, if you're only going to play word games and pretend like reason is some kind of infallible guide to truth, mere reason, then I think it's a superficial way for a lot of people to get into this trap that he's presenting people that aren't familiar with what street epistemology is.
I gotta get in here real quick because I see something in the audience that I think needs to be discussed here. Because Craig and I were both on Pinecreek, his channel, and Pinecreek pulled the street epistemology approach on both of us, and it was a little challenging. And I can see Nathan Ormond, and Craig said he knows Nathan Ormond pretty well. Nathan Ormond says that Pinecreek turned him into an agnostic from a Christian. What?
Okay, well, so there's a couple of things. I thought, Nathan, I thought you said you were an agnostic Christian a week ago before you were on his show. Now, I have two things to say. Should I talk about the Pinecreek or the other thing?
Talk about them both. I mean, this is important stuff. We've got someone in the audience here who this actually worked on.
Well, okay, so the Pinecreek version of street epistemology, I mentioned this in my video. I kind of endorse the Anthony Magnabosco version because it's more just asking questions and letting you answer. It's not trying to push you in a direction, whereas Pinecreek is kind of street epistemology meets counter apologetics, meets gotcha questions, meets jujitsu, basically. Most people, if you're just randomly drawing at people who are Christians or professed Christians, they haven't really examined why they believe what they believe. A lot of people are in a place where they're a Christian because they're raised Christian, or they go to church a little, they're kind of down with it a little, but they have never really taken it out and looked at why they believe what they believe. And it's also true about Democrats. It's also true about Republicans. It's true about a lot of people. It's not true about atheists for the most part, because it's a self-selected group. They've made themselves the atheists. They've taken a label, so they've actually taken a lot more time than your average Christian to really dig into why they're an atheist. It's more of a conscious choice, right?
Yeah, I think when I was a very weak Christian, if somebody came up to me and started asking me about Jesus's resurrection, I would probably start agreeing, yeah, we're really not sure about that. Don't know much about it at all, because it's really, really where I stood. So
right, but I don't think that's what Anthony Magnabosco does. I think that's what Pinecreek does for sure. He'll go to so do you really think zombies walk the earth? And he'll go right to the gotcha parts of the Bible, the parts that the anti-theists go to try and win a debate. I don't think that's what Anthony Magnabosco does. I've never seen him do it. That's why I wonder how many, if nobody's walking away mad, then he's kind of half doing it right as just a pure exploration of belief. I'm not sure though.
So, hey everyone,
oh,
it's
here
Andrew.
We go. Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
Hey, Andrew.
Sorry, I was a bit delayed, but basically my key issue with street epistemology, both in the gentler way of exploring beliefs and in the more sort of aggressive proselytizing or evangelical, sharing the bad news of atheism type thing, is that it presumes the definist fallacy, sometimes called the Socratic fallacy, which is that one can discursively or through talking describe the grounds for one's beliefs, and that if one cannot describe the grounds for one's belief, then it is in some sense irrational to hold those grounds.
Yeah.
Right. You said that yesterday, the difference between tacit and discursive, like being able to justify knowing what you believe. Go ahead, finish, because I thought that was a great point you made on that tweet convo with that guy, with the epistemologist.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's the myth of pure reason that I also like to phrase it that way. I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, and it's basically this, and I can't pronounce the Greek words, partially because I have a head cold, but basically there are two parts of reason. One is the talking part, where we're able to do reasoning with language, and then there's a part of our reason which is like seeing, which allows us to see the truth of things. And that's how you know, like, modus ponens is true, or laws of logic. Or that's also how you know that time exists, and time is divisible into past, present, and future. There's this ability of the human mind to see concepts and grasp and apprehend them that we rely on for our most fundamental beliefs. And for many theists, that's actually the way that they understand it. The other frustration I have, and this is because for many years as a young adult, I was a very serious Pyrrhonian skeptic. But culture and tradition and those types of things are perfectly sound grounds for belief and behavior. So it is perfectly plausible and reasonable to say that I am a Christian because I was raised a Christian, and
Of
that
course.
isn't actually a defeater. But one of the implications of street epistemology is that tradition is not a legitimate ground for belief or behavior, which I take strong issue with.
Well, what starts to happen with that, because that's kind of like a sociology of epistemology. If you're raised Christian and you have no reason to, you're at comfort with the people around you, and you trust them and you like them, and you have no real reason to doubt them, then you're cool. But if you like Matt Dillahunty or Apologia, and you start moving away from that group, and then you don't really identify with them anymore, like they're kind of vaguely embarrassing to you, that's when you start on a process where you know what they taught you, you start examining and looking further. Like if you're totally at peace with the type of person you're raised as, you don't ever do that. You don't dig into your own mechanics of belief. You're just, I'm a Christian because I was this because I was this. So I agree.
Yeah, and one thing that some atheists do get right is oftentimes they notice certain lacks or privations or errors of the culture that they were raised in, but they sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But speaking of street epistemology again, the other thing is epistemology is not taught at anything except like the college level deep philosophy. So people don't even understand what foundationalism is, or coherentism, or these other things. And that's part of the issue is, and this is why the Plato's dialogues need some interpretation, is that by engaging in this type of questioning, you can basically just confuse people and make them upset. And there's probably a kernel of truth to the fact that Socrates' discussions with the people of Athens were in some sense just irritating to them because he didn't acknowledge the existence of tacit knowledge. And part of it is he was going against the sophists who denied the existence of tacit knowledge, and so tying a sophist in knots is a great way to show the existence of tacit knowledge. But when you don't have the moral fortitude of Socrates and try to use some of his own techniques, you can end up sowing confusion rather than thought. The other frustration that I had, at least with my experience with it on Twitter, is people will often do one of two things. They will either end up coming to tacit beliefs themselves that they don't know how to explain that they're tacit beliefs, or they will also bring out these defeaters of all knowledge, right? So the conversation I had with a street epistemologist on Twitter a few days ago, he ended up asking, well, how do you know that your cognitive faculties are behaving properly?
Mhm.
Couldn't they not be? Couldn't everyone be under delusion?
Yeah, that's a
And
total.
yeah, and I mean it's plausible, I guess, in some sense. But if it is, then Pyrrhonian skepticism is true, and you can't really
Yeah.
use rational analysis to determine whether or not certain methods are reliable for
I gotta,
finding the truth.
let me break in here. So Andrew, you have to bring it down to the layperson's level, because I've got people in the chat are saying that some of the language that you're using is beyond some people because they weren't maybe philosophically trained or something like that.
Sure.
So when you say tacit knowledge, just define everything so everyone knows what you're talking about.
Sure. Tacit knowledge is knowledge that you cannot explain in words. So that means that oftentimes you don't know how to label it or you can't explain it.
But you get it
So
from experience. So
Right.
it's from
Doesn't
personal
mean you don't
experience,
have it.
not necessarily taught.
yeah, so typically the way that tacit knowledge comes about is we have a seed in our nature to form that belief, and then that seed develops through experience in a environment that is not deceptive. So an example of this is basically everyone believes that other people have minds. And we're not taught this. We don't learn this through experience per se, because I can't experience your mind,
Mhm.
Stephanie. I can't experience anyone else's mind, but I have this seed in my nature, in my mind, this preconception that gets activated as I develop into an adult. Similarly, this is how we develop language. We have a tendency to develop grammars, and as a baby is raised in a language, they will learn Chinese or English or be bilingual in Esperanto and German or whatever, depending on what they're exposed to.
Mm.
But they could not do that if they did not have uh, the the seed that gets developed through experience. And language is a great example. You don't have to know how to diagram a sentence in order to speak English. And if you asked, a 5-year-old to diagram a sentence, most wouldn't be able to, even though they're able to construct perfectly valid and understandable
Yeah.
language. And so that's what tacit knowledge is things that you don't necessarily have the ability to explain.
Well, let's bring this back to street epistemology. So the approach that the atheists would use if they're approaching someone, say you're approaching a weak Christian, what kind of questions do you think would be the ones that they would use that might be the most jarring for Christians? If you wanted to, like, if you could specifically, you could take the terms that you just used and apply that to the types of questions people would be asking.
Sure. So basically, the typical strategy seems to be, why do you believe, and why do you believe that those grounds for believing are reasonable,
Mhm.
and so on and so forth. And eventually you'll end up at one of three possible cases. You'll either end up at foundational beliefs that you don't they rest on themselves, right? There's no
Right.
further that you can go. You form circles of beliefs so that they have a coherence among themselves, but there's not one belief.
Let me just interject for a sec.
Go ahead.
That's one of the things that Planaga is trying to argue with. He's trying to argue that belief in God can be a properly basic belief, like a foundational belief, and it doesn't require its own justification. That's one of the things that I started trying to talk about in some of my older videos with like pain of a headache. It doesn't really require justification. It's the reality of its own experience. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. And then the third one is just asking why an infinite amount of times, and you never actually come to an explanation that way. And the one of the key issues with street epistemology is they never explicitly state or tell the person that these are the things, but will just offer a criticism of each one of these positions. I tend to be a foundationalist with some sympathy for coherentism. But that's the thing, is you will always come to one of these stops, basically.
And I want to also pick up on that. This is something that I've emphasized with Thomas Reid, this common sense realism, the Scottish school of philosophy. He also was an advocate of a broadly conceived foundationalism. So when the atheist or skeptic plays this straight epistemological game and says, how do you know that? Or whatever reason the theist gives, how do you know that is the case? They're playing the mere skeptical game. And I think I heard J.P. Moreland once in an interview say you can turn the tables on a person by simply saying, well, why should we trust your skepticism has any weight? That they must unknowingly ascribe to some foundational beliefs. And this is something that, again, was defended by Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, Anglicans like well, I'm not gonna. Well, who was I thinking of? Thomas Reid and Edmund Burke, and so many others. So this game of playing the postmodernist or skeptical game of justification it might be appealing to a person with a superficial understanding of philosophy, but once they read past page 3 of a philosophy textbook, they're really not going to think it's a very convincing method.
Let me say something really quickly, because I don't want to forget this. I see Saigar, there's a bunch of people in the chat that are all familiar with us, all people we love, and they're great. All the people who are here, thank you so much. I see Gavin and Ken and Nathan and great people in that chat. So, but I wanted to say, Sai said, he just said this, and I don't want to forget that he said this. Sai's written a book called The Works of His Hands, which is a phenomenal book. It just came out in November. He's already had a lot of sales. He's already getting good ratings and that kind of stuff. And I read the book and I loved it. And basically what he did was he was an atheist, and he was raised in the world of science. And then he came to Christianity because through his atheism and his science. So when people were asking about his foundational beliefs, he went right to his atheist foundation and how science brought him to God. And it's all explained in his book, which is really great. I highly recommend it. In fact, we'll have to put a link to the book in the chat here. But the reason I'm mentioning that is because as a Christian, when we say, well, I was raised as a Catholic, and so now I'm a Christian because I'm a Catholic and my parents took me to church. That is what the street epistemologists think, oh my gosh, that's something that we can just break. But when you say you're raised with something that they admire, like science and atheism, that throws them for a loop.
You got to interpret. You always have to interpret the findings of pure experience or phenomena in the light of a background of foundational beliefs. And so I would simply ask the skeptic, once they bring that up, why do you think that's a pertinent question to this conversation? Or what basis for your skepticism do you have? The more I study this, the more there's a whole line from Aristotle to Thomas Reid, as I said earlier, that things have natural ends, and Andrew went on to indicate as much. Things have ends in themselves, and we use the process of analogy. So we can look at the overall picture and try to do it that way. And there's no if we're playing a game of pure reason, well, that's not how we live our lives, or that's not how we conduct our lives, or look at the world of phenomena. We come to it with a whole whole panoply of background beliefs, and if they're warranted or not, and we all have foundational beliefs.
That's true. Craig, what do you want to say on that?
Well, there's the thing, he mentioned Aquinas, and I'm pretty sure it was Aquinas who talked about, or maybe it was John Calvin, the sensus divinatus. That's one of the things that Planet Jet operates off of. I'm assuming that, I know, Stephanie, you kind of had, and I'm guessing that these guys are Christians, so they might have too. But if you've had that sense, like, that God is pushing you here, God's nudging you here, oh wow, my wife has gets really strong feelings like that. She'll come right out and say, like, I really just felt like doing this, and I really felt that God put on my heart to do X. And I know a lot of Christians who feel that way, where it's strong. It's actually a convincing, like, I felt led to go to my neighbor's house and, I don't know, take care of his kids and serve them ice cream or something. I don't know, something good.
You hear that a lot. I'll tell you a quick story. My pastor, his name's Pastor Corey, fantastic guy, and he's in my kids. He was leading the kids basketball team. But what he said is he felt led by God to fast for 21 days with water only. And I was blown away when I heard that, because I thought, I don't even think I could go. I'm going to embarrass myself when I say that I haven't really fasted. So I listened to that. And I'm like, well, I've never felt led by God to do that, but I have to admire someone who went 21 days with no food. I just honestly don't think I could even physically do that. It's amazing.
Right. I'd love to see, well, the thing, because there are Christians also who are all over the place in terms of how much they actually subjectively feel like they experience God. So you've got a lot of Christians, like an Episcopalian or something, who, yeah, they go through the motions of being a Christian, but they might have had that one experience when they were 23 that they thought potentially was God. And then I know other Christians who have those experiences all the time, and they'll talk about them all the time. I'd love to see one of them do street epistemology, because but going back to what Andrew started with, just because it's not, you can't always vocalize and articulate what your reasons actually are. You might actually have really good reasons, but being able to articulate them on the moment, that's a totally different thing. That's a skill. That's not necessarily has anything to do with what you actually know. So
I want to add that Pinecreek, he must have had his ears ringing, because he's in the chat now doing street epistemology on it.
Yes, bring it, Dougie Doug.
But he's asking people about an athlete with a higher win-loss ratio. So he's like, someone said, I forgot the name of the athlete someone just picked, because I think Merriweather, I saw a great athlete. And then Pinecreek's then saying, if you found an athlete with an even higher win-loss ratio, would you change your mind? So I don't know.
Michael Jordan, highest of the high.
Is he talking about sports or what?
Yeah, he's doing epistemology on changing our mind about sports heroes.
Well, I would argue that the definition of the greatest athlete being the best one with the best win-loss ratio is not the appropriate definition for the best athlete.
Yeah, the one that shows the most virtue, the most virtue.
Yep, the one who is the best sportsman, which means the one who plays the fairest and aims the highest and acts with greatness of soul in everything he does related to athletics.
No, you're sounding like
practicing
Jonathan
Christian.
Haidt.
In other words, the practicing Christian watch Chariots of Fire. He just explained Chariots of Fire in a nutshell. I think. I forget. Wasn't that what that was about? I think that's.
What about, and I think Michael Jordan, from what I've seen about him, I think he's right up there, I'd have to say.
He was like so dominant, it was ridiculous. It's like, a really good basketball player would score like 20 points a game, Jordan would score like 45, and you'd be like, "What?" Like he was so crazily dominant. But it was a combination. Go ahead.
I'll be honest. I have some pretty good defense in my time. I don't know. It'd be a good matchup between me and Jordan. That's a joke, obviously, guys.
So humble, Josh.
That's a joke.
Johnson, okay. So humble. No, I'll tell you what. I saw Shaquille O'Neal myself in person at Disney World a few years back. Actually, probably.
Yeah, he's like 6'8" or something, right?
Oh, he's so tall. And we were coming out of Buzz Lightyear, and he was standing there, and he must have had 6 or 7 kids with him. And I don't think they were all his. I think he just had kids and their friends. And he was, I mean, it was funny because my husband's 6'6", and my husband stood next to him and looked way up. And he's like, this man made me feel super short. Just so tall. But he seemed like a pretty nice guy. I mean, I can say Shaquille, just seeing him and how he was treating these kids. We followed him actually and took pictures with the back of his head, and because that's what you do when you're a fan.
Take pictures of the back of his head. That's funny.
Well, we didn't want to let him see us taking pictures from the front of his head, so we took him. So we posted on Facebook like, "Here we got Shaquille in the back of his head." Impressive, you know.
Stephanie, are we watching any street epistemology, or we're just talking about it?
We could. I mean, I could flick on something if you guys want.
I was just wondering if it was on the schedule. I didn't know. Doesn't matter to me either way. I'm good either way.
I haven't put it on. I have watched. My one fear is that what happened last time, Craig, when you were on the channel, and we put somebody's stuff.
Yeah.
And I've been noticing,
Don't
like
sing.
Steve
Nobody sing a
McRae.
song.
Steve McRae is, he just got a copyright strike. He got in a fight with this girl, Katie, and he's been putting videos using her, like he would put stuff of her videos and make commentary, and they apparently gave him a copyright strike. So I get kind of.
Right, I was gonna actually warn you, because it's possible, because we were actually commenting on that Kanye West video. We weren't playing it for people to, and that's supposedly fair use. But it might have been one of your enemies. You know how you have all these "I hate Stephanie" atheists floating around. One of them might have.
The reports came straight from Kanye's camp and from Joel Osteen's camp. So I think they've got some sort of automatic settings. But it wasn't a copyright strike for me. It was a content violation. So they said it's not going to hurt my account at all. Luckily.
Oh, good.
So.
Well, I just want to say that the street epistemologists. Yeah. Just hearing y'all discuss them, and of course I wasn't, super familiar with them beforehand. They do sound like sophists. I don't think they have any real substance to them.
Well, as far as examining a belief, I have no real issue with that. I mean, that's what I was trying to differentiate between. I
mean, in terms of pure reason, if they're not going to discuss philosophy or history, and if they're just going to keep asking questions, I mean, I really don't think that's fair. I think a more a wide-ranging dialogue would show there's no substance to street epistemology.
Yeah, well, and that's sort of the dividing line, right, between sophistry and Socratic methods is whether or not you're trying to get to the truth or you're just trying to be critical and analytical of someone's beliefs. And, basically the key issue is that not very many people have the skills to articulate why they believe things.
Right.
For most people, religion is experiential, and not everyone's a theology geek, and nor does everyone need to be a theology geek.
And also, that doesn't mean if a person's not a philosopher and they run into a street epistemologist who does know some superficial, surface level philosophical skepticism, and they can't answer the street epistemologist, that doesn't mean the person who the Christian is irrational in their beliefs. Belief in God is, or can be, and I think is, properly basic, just like you alluded to, Andrew, that the belief in other minds is properly basic, because we are the type of people, or we're the type of entity that can discover and know things in reality. And this is basic Aristotle, the classical tradition.
So let me go back to, let's get back to, I'm looking at the chat, and I don't know if all of you guys can see the chat, but I'm watching the chat, and I can see Sygard interacting with Pinecreek and G-Man and a couple of other people, and they're talking about street epistemology, and Pinecreek's kind of saying it's down on a level that's not at the, you don't need to talk philosophically to be a street epistemologist. You, instead of asking words like what justification, you would just basically say something about what would it take to change your mind. And so do any of you want to speak to, I mean, let me ask you this, all three of you are Christians. What would it take, if someone asked you, what would it take to change your mind about Christianity? What would you say?
Well, that question already starts off. See, here's the problem in a nutshell. If you start off with the foregone conclusion in your mind as an atheist, God does not exist. Let me now ask you questions to illustrate this fact to you and to the people who are going to be watching this video. You're already leading the witness. So you're already asking the wrong questions. If you have assigned to me the burden of proof, then you have an epistemic responsibility to ask appropriate questions that might produce God belief in you, rather than to try to debunk. In other words, what people believe is actually irrelevant to what's true, right? Everybody understands this. If Stephanie believes that gravity doesn't exist, it's irrelevant to whether gravity actually exists or not. Now, what Stephanie believes ultimately about God could be completely irrelevant. So if you're an atheist and you're trying to legitimately explore the proposition God exists, you got to go deeper than just trying to pull the Christian off of their belief, because that's not that complicated of a task. Did that make sense, what I just said?
Yes, and that's the mere reason part of this. And a lot of thinkers like, well, let's go back to Immanuel Kant, or today a Tom Holland. They give vastly different questions why there is no real basis for, or a justification for being skeptical of belief in God or Christianity, or that we have to have starting points, especially with Kant. So yeah, this is a sophistry game, playing a game of using just words or using concepts from mere reason. You have to take in the whole.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's go back, because I see Pinecreek now asking Craig, what would it take, or would you want someone with a false belief have a way to change their mind? Now, absolutely, we would say yes to that. So let me ask Pinecreek, what would it take for you to change your mind about atheism? So I want to ask any atheist in the audience what it would take for them to change your mind about atheism. And I always get the answer, God knows what it would take, but.
Well, the answer to that, I would say, is that beliefs, or at least disbelief, is partially a function of will. And so the question I would ask the atheist is, are you willing against that belief, or are you doing everything that you can to be receptive to that? As far as what would change my belief on the Christianity question, if you could show that my reasoning is an error, or that I'm making a epistemic mistake, that would be an example of a defeater for my beliefs. But the interesting thing is no one can seem to point out any error that I'm making in the foundations of my belief, or providing a defeater. So that's that.
Let me raise something. Even if the skeptic could raise an objection to some of our arguments for the existence of God, that still would not be a justification for atheism. That would, because God is a properly basic belief, much like belief in other minds or belief in the external world. We have great warrant and justification for that. So it would take an awful amount to prove Christianity is false. Well, you had the right time, the right people to be able to do that in the first century, in the right place, and they could not do that. Paul illustrates this in 1 Corinthians 15. And there was a lot of hostility. They could have drug out the body of Jesus. They didn't. They fell. Christianity spread like wildfire, and it still does. I think that's a lot of warrant for it actually being true if God was trying to reveal himself. So I just don't, I'm just not convinced at all by any of these atheist objections.
Let me build on that kind of thing for a second. So I want to go back to the idea of intuition versus reasoning, because a couple of you mentioned reasoning, and I spent some time listening to David Wood's videos a couple of days ago, and I made a video with David Wood because actually I heard him say that we're allowed to mirror all of his stuff, so I don't have to worry about copyright violations with him. So I listened to a bunch of his things, and he basically said that he came to Jesus because of reasoning. So he's just started reasoning with himself, and he came to Jesus that way. And so did J. Warner Wallace, who's that detective who came to Christianity from reasoning. And so did Lee Strobel, came to Christianity from reasoning. But I think myself, I came to Christianity moreover with intuition, because I felt like there was always this God presence. I felt like there's always a higher presence beyond.
Right. That's the sensus divinitatis. That's an actual thing that some people really seem to have and others do not. And that's a perfect justification for you, assuming you're right. Okay, I'm assuming you're right, Stephanie. But I asked Doug, does Doug like any of the three that you mentioned? I doubt he finds any of them convincing. Or
So
any
Doug,
of the atheists.
if any of the atheists who are in the audience, so Doug and Nathan's still in there, it looks like, do you find the idea of reasoning or intuition to be convincing enough?
Or no, the three guys you mentioned.
Oh, I'm sorry. Or Lee Strobel, J. Warner Wallace, or
Because they probably don't.
David Wood. Because those three came through reasoning. Lee Strobel studied for 2 years. He was an investigative reporter with the Chicago Tribune or Sun-Times. I forget which one.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing an answer. Well, what do you guys, I mean, all three of you.
What you just said is actually the basis for a real justification. Let's assume for argument's sake that you're right, Stephanie, that you had a sense of God, God's presence, and you're right. It was God. That's perfectly good justification for you to believe it. How do we make it real to someone who doesn't share in the belief and has never experienced that feeling? That's where the epistemology, that's where we need to build the real epistemology, so that somebody can actually prove their internal justice. Like if I have a migraine headache, I don't need to justify it to myself at all. But how do I build a warrant for somebody who doesn't believe me? That's really the issue. And it's weird. It's complicated, actually. It's actually really difficult. Go ahead.
I don't think you have to even, presuppose this sensus divinitatis. I certainly do think we all have that, and we can, lessen the presence of God in our lives. Many of the most famous atheists have written about they felt God in their lives, or they wish God was in their lives. Some of the existentialists would often write about that. Bertrand Russell. I have a bunch of quotes from famous atheists like that. But, as Aristotle or Augustine or Aquinas, someone in that tradition would say, you can argue for things as simple as change in the world. If there's anything that changes in the world, there must be something that, and this is on the basis of reason, not intuition, that is holding the change together, the causal series together, not as in a linear series, as Ed Feser would say. He says in a hierarchical series of causes that holds the whole causal chain together. There's many different arguments in his book, 5 Proofs for the Existence of God. It just seems that we have different ways to know that God exists, from a living presence, from intuition, but also from reason. And this was the overwhelmingly majority viewpoint until some thinkers during the Enlightenment gave caricatures of Christianity, and these myths started taking hold. So there really is no basis to skepticism. I read about this stuff, and a lot of it's based on myth.
I go back to looking at, I'd go to the really basic things, general revelation versus specific revelation. I think honestly, if you look outside, I mean, I know this sounds like something that people will laugh at, but I think about even Braxton Hunter. I think he's got t-shirts now that say, just look at the trees. And I know when we say that, atheists go crazy and they're like, you can't just say, just look at the trees. But I'm sorry, I'm looking at the trees and the flowers and the mountains and all of this stuff that we have that's so beautiful on our planet. And I think you're selling God short if you try to pretend there's no creator for this beautiful creation. I think that if you look at DNA and DNA code and try to guess, oh, there's 3.5 billion well-ordered, what they call characters, and then you try to pretend that there's no coder, I just don't think it makes any sense. And God's made it clear in the Bible that just looking out there into nature should give enough.
Yeah.
I mean, compare our planet to Mars and all the other planets. None of them even are close to 10 habitable zones that the Earth has overcome to be where we are.
So just feel them in your heart, atheists. Just feel it in your heart. Is that our answer?
Oh, G-Man, I got 1,000 subs. I'm so excited. I got 1,001.
Why? Who's subbed, G-Man?
A party. So
your channel SJ is taking off, and
It's exploding.
I hope that,
yeah, so quickly. I look at atheist channels and they grow way faster, except for Mike Winger's channel. He's up to 100,000 subs. And I look at IP's got 120,000 subs. And who's the other guy? What Do You Mean? He's only been around for a year and he's got something like 40,000 subs. And then there's me.
Well, you're
the little pathetic.
I'm worse.
Craig,
actually,
you and I are on the same.
about-
Craig and I are these little teeny channels we're trying to grow.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Everybody listening to this needs to subscribe to Craig's, to our channel. Max was the former head. Andrew is the head now, and I'm just a guy. And SJ's channel. Yeah, I think highly of y'all. Everybody should subscribe, and you are great Christian intellectuals.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to go back. I see a question from Pinecreek, and I pay attention to Pinecreek here quite a bit in this chat because he is an official street epistemologist as far as I can see. So he's saying, let's assume for a second that street epistemology is promoting atheism. And I think that's a very fair assumption. Why is it bad for people to become atheists? What would you guys say about that?
The one thing I said on my video that I made about this subject is, if atheists going to atheist, right? If there has to be atheists and they're going to try and convince me that God isn't real and my faith is based in a delusion, then I'd much rather have them doing it the way Anthony Magnabosco does it than the way Aaron Ra does it, which is like, no, you're stupid being a Christian. Your faith is. So I'm okay with street epistemology. Anybody else? I mean, what's the actual question though?
So I mean, is atheism a bad thing on its face value? Is it bad if people become atheists and the United States suddenly tilts to European-like atheism?
Well, I think atheism is a willful rejection of God and reason and common sense. I hate to say that, but they support a lot of alternative sexual lifestyles and so forth. Religion, and specifically Christianity, has bound together Western civilization. It took the best parts of Greek civilization and preserved it and even improved it and ended slavery twice and invented the institution of science and the university system. It wasn't atheism, it was Christianity. And it's a very big bet. It's a bigger bet than Pascal's wager to say that you're going to place all your hope in atheism, who have built nothing rather than Christianity. If you're like an Edmund Burke and preserve history and how we got to today, you're not going to be an atheist. You're going to be humble, and you're going to step back and look at tradition and the people of the past. We stand in a long line of great defenders of the faith that have done the world so much good. and have brought us so many great things. It seems to me, and I hate to say this, but atheism seems to take a lot of faith, and it's very speculative in this regard when it comes to history and the overall picture of reality.
So his answer is there's possible long-term negative consequences of deconversion en masse that
Yes.
we as a culture have no idea about yet. And if we throw the baby out with the bathwater because there's a couple of things about Christianity you don't like, I've argued some of the same stuff in my videos, that, you know, you're building a world without religion, and it's potentially a lot more pitfalls in that potential world than you realize.
Well, hold on. This
There
isn't
are
just
atheists who argue this, by the way. Brett Weinstein, for example. There are atheists who also who are on this
Well,
page.
Nietzsche argued this. Nietzsche portended what happened with 120 million people dying last century due to communism.
Yeah,
In those
totally true.
communist atheist leaders. And it wasn't based on the atheism, but they were trying to run religion out of those countries.
Nietzsche also saw something, atheism, that builds their own gods and their own churches. The temple or the cult of reason during the French Revolution, and so many thousands of people died in Paris. When you study history, and not just pure reason, as a street epistemologist would like us to, believe that's all to knowledge, but when you study all of knowledge, which includes history, then you know that certain things have ramifications and have ideologies to them. Look at the 20th century. If you're an atheist today, if you're going to say that Christianity is responsible for the Crusades or the Inquisition, then surely, if you're going to be honest, you have to look at the 20th century atheist bloodbath of what happened during this time. So, I mean, there are ramifications.
I want to go. I see Andrew said, because Pinecreek asked, what about, why is rejecting God bad? And Andrew has answered this, but I want Andrew to expand on it. He said, because rejecting divine, transcendent, ultimate reality, which is goodness itself, will go badly. Andrew,
sure. So, the key issue is that God is not a optional belief, but is a key thing of how you orient and construct your life and value structure and behaviors. And if you're aligned towards God, that means that you will be functioning properly as you are created to be. And that's what faith in God basically is, in very general terms. And if you reject that or disorient yourself willfully from that, then there's no possibility, or there's extremely limited possibility of you fulfilling your created purpose and having a meaningful life and so on and so forth. And that's what it means to be spiritually disoriented. And to be spiritually disoriented is bad because it means you're not going anywhere. You're just, spinning in circles.
That's reasonable. Did Craig or Dunstan, you guys want to comment on that? Do you feel like you have a spiritual orientation that you're trying to align yourself with on a daily basis?
Absolutely. The more I've studied, I've recently come. I've been a Christian for a while, but because of Andrew and because of things, I've recently come to the Anglican faith, the Church of England, the Anglican faith, and it brings with it a sense of community, a sense of binding. Also, that's something atheism lacks. I remember giving a paper in college decades ago on this. The atheism lacks any sense of community that binds people. You had it for thousands of years, but now you're going for a radical separation from all that history has brought us. And that's not to say history hasn't brought us some bad things, but how we got to today and how we condemn some of those bad things is the foundational beliefs that we have arrived at today by people like Aristotle and Augustine and Thomas Aquinas. So if you get rid of things like virtue, in that there are certain behaviors, right action, and certain things we should do, and certain acts like homosexuality that we should condemn. If you get away from that, you're getting away from the classical tradition that how we got to today. So I would be very mindful if we're going to do a radical separation. And that's all I have to say.
Well, let's build on some of the stuff that you just said, because you did point some things out that some people in the audience, especially if there's atheists in the audience, they might not be totally comfortable with what you said. So do you think it's possible to live a moral life if you're an atheist? And that could go to any of you.
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
only because they're, like Tom Holland would say, they're Christians in the closet. That they just don't. This is my opinion. It seems to me that they maybe they've been hurt in the past. I don't know, but they're borrowing Christian presuppositions, like the value of truth, that we should treat people with dignity and honor. There's so many things, it seems to me, that they're believing in, that they live their lives according to a Christian ethic, but out of their mouth comes words against that Christian ethic.
That reminds me of Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you guys know the guy called Ozzy. What's his last name? Ozymandias or something like that. So Ozzy was standing in the crowd in a Jordan Peterson debate with Matt Dillahunty, and he stood up and he said something like, "I've heard you don't believe there's any atheists," or something like that, or any true atheists. And Jordan Peterson basically said, yeah, he doesn't believe that, because if you're an atheist who truly believes and lives out what that means, that everybody would be like that horrible person in Dostoevsky. And so, yeah, so that was kind of a controversial thing that Jordan Peterson said. I don't know if any of you guys heard that.
Yeah, totally. The atheists never fail to bring that up. That's like that's one of their big complaints about it. It's a better argument than it sounds like on its face. Actually, the way that he just said it was a better version of it. The idea that left to your own, in the Christian Bible, there's a philosophical underpinning that is actually really sound that most people don't recognize. That left to your own devices, we would be, people think of the sin nature or the carnal nature as a totally different way than what it actually is. Left to our own devices, we'd be terrible. And some of not being left to our own devices is the structure of our family and society and the world around us. But that was heavily predicated on Christianity for north of 1,000 years. So there's, the idea that Matt Dillahunty, if he just stops going to church and stops believing in God, is now going to kill, is kind of, it's a weak version of it. But the idea that Matt Dillahunty, kind of what he just said, has all these Christian presuppositions floating around in him, including a universalist ethos. Sam Harris has a whole bunch of ideas that are totally sacrosanct to him, that are basically Christian ideas, and they're really, really important values to him, like the dignity of the worth of the individual human being, things like that. Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson's value systems was very much almost identical, but Jordan Peterson was trying to say that it was predicated on Christianity, which Western civilization is predicated on, and Sam Harris was trying to say that Christianity gets in the way of it. It's basically what he just said. I'm not doing a very good job of explaining it, but it's basically what he just said. There's a real big important truth buried in that, I think.
Yeah, and from what both of you are saying, actually, and all of you have kind of mentioned this a little bit, but going back to history, and I know that Dunstan's been pointing out a lot of history, but going back to history and looking at how Christianity changed the world, and if you look at the reverence that people placed on wealthy people and the powerful, and they were considered blessed by God, and the poor and the meek were considered cursed by God, Jesus changed that whole thing. He completely did a 180. Suddenly women were revered. Suddenly women were given rights. They built hospitals for people who would never have been served before in hospitals, because right before that, it was just built for warriors and soldiers.
Right, and Jesus even says it, that what you have done unto the least of my children, you've done unto me. That's Christianity in a nutshell.
Completely different than anything that was out there before.
Right, that's Tom Holland's argument, that the Roman world was about power. And if you were a victim in the Roman world and said, I'm a victim, they'd be like, cool, you understand your relationship to the state now. And they would, here's my boot in your face forever. Like they
Or they throw them in the Colosseum.
right, or they crucify them. I mean, crucifixion was the state dominates you, and if you go against the state, we have the right to do whatever we want to subjugate you. And Christianity totally did a 360 on that entire upending of that entire philosophy. And a lot of it has to do with the most forgotten guy in the room is the most important in God's sight, because each person is made in the image of God and everyone has dignity in the sight of God. So it's a really big, important philosophical justification for everything in Western civilization that atheists love, or most atheists hold near and dear.
You've reminded me to get Tom Holland's new book, because I did hear an interview with him, and I guess his book's called Dominion or something like that.
Yes, we should do. They have a couple cool debates. We should do those.
Oh, that's a great idea. I'm trying to remember where I heard him. I think I heard him on Justin Brierley's channel. So
there's two debates on Justin Brier's that are great. I've watched both, or half of both. Go ahead. Dunstan, is that your name?
Yeah. Saint Dunstan. I choose the name of Saint Dunstan because, as I was telling y'all earlier, my car accident happened on May 19th, and Dunstan died on. Saint Dunstan died I believe it was 983 on May 19th. So I got life when he lost his. So it means a lot to me. I totally agree. I've been listening to Dominion. You can also look at other books on this by Rodney Stark or Ronald Numbers. Right now, I'm reading some of Fezzer's books because Max told me about them. And one of them is called The Last Superstition. It discusses some of these myths from the Enlightenment. And I know this is bold, but to say atheism is rational, I believe that is the last superstition. I think that's
fight is throwing it down the gauntlet.
Well, I would love to debate a street epistemologist.
Do it, smoke them.
So if there's any street epistemologists who are in the audience and they want to debate Dunstan, he is ready to go. He's fired up.
How about the founder?
Undefeated. Undefeated 400 debates under his belt. Not a single blow, not a single sentence has been spoken that he hasn't. Are you kidding me?
Let me tell you something. Sometimes I've joked in the past, and I apologize. I'm just a person, and
like we all are.
Atheists. I actually love atheists. I've been trying to show a God. Max has taught me that. Andrew has taught me that. Reverend Jack has taught me that. And I've been trying to seek a life of virtue and kindness to others. But I tend to joke around. But we're all in this together. And I'm just trying to communicate the best I can. So
amen. You hear that, atheists? Nothing but love for our fellow man, right?
All right, it's good stuff. So I want to ask the audience, I'm looking at questions out there. Are there any questions that you would like to ask anyone here? If you do have a question, please feel free to put it in here. I see some of the usual people who come to my channel. I want to say thank you, everybody, for coming here, even if you're not a usual person who comes to my channel. I saw some people posting on how they found my channel or how they found any of you guys. Some of it is through things like the non sequitur, which we don't see anymore, unfortunately, or Steve McRae, or different places like that. So we got a good group. Or Modern Day Debate. We should probably throw him a bone too.
Yeah, definitely.
Actually, I have automatic links.
And subscribe to all of them.
Yeah, I have links in my automated thing right now, so it plays in all this. So.
And I would have had automated links in mine if I could figure out how to do it. John, Buck,
didn't I show you how to do it?
You told me how to do it, but I actually need some. John understands this. I'm actually like totally incompetent. Yeah, I need somebody to actually go in and do it for me. People have rent.
Yeah.
Wait. I want to say Brenda Von Assen. She says she would like to debate you. I don't know if it's debate or do a street epistemology sort of thing. So Stephen
maybe
Steen
on
wants to know,
Modern Day.
So Stephen Steen wants to know, G-Man asks, how should we prepare for an evangelical atheist. And then we want to know, why is James from Modern Day Debate so pretty?
It's just, some guys just got it. Some guys got all the luck, and some
He's
guys,
a handsome guy.
some of us got to make do with what we got, and some of us are blessed by God to be just good looking for the ladies. Ladies love him.
He's a handsome guy. I mean,
he's no Jim Majors though.
So he's going to listen to this. Well, he doesn't have that curly Q mustache or whatever they call that.
Yeah, that's a pretty man. That's a pretty man.
Hey, wait, I want to go back. So I want to go back to this. So how should we prepare for an evangelical atheist? G-Man wants to know that. Does anyone want to pick up on that?
So
a person who approaches you. Yeah, well, like evangelical, like they're basically proselytizing atheism and how wonderful it is to be an atheist.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to walk away. Sometimes you have to say, I love you, brother. Unconditional love.
Agree to disagree.
But yeah, we're maybe if we could do this on a longer form discussion. But right now, I just wish you the best. Have a great day.
What do you think, Craig?
I'd go Kalam. And they go Kalam. Yeah, uncause cause. Oh, I never thought about it that way. Yeah, I know you never thought about it. Now you have. They go, okay. I guess I'm a Christian now. Of course you are. Give me the tithes.
Andrew.
I think the Kalam is really powerful, actually.
Well, you got to do it like that, though, Stefan. You can't just present the argument. You got to go Kalam. So
should I get kind of like bash him over and bash him in the head and say Kalam?
Hey, Andrew.
Yes,
Andrew,
exactly.
do you have anything to say, Andrew?
Yeah, I guess the two things I'll say is I'll be the dissenter and say that the Kalam is my least favorite cosmological argument. I actually think it's the weakest one.
I agree, actually. I just play around with throwing the word out.
But I'm just teasing you guys. But yeah, everyone in the audience is in our prayers, and please contact me, especially at Astratalities on Twitter, if you want to chat, and hopefully we'll be able to do stuff like this again.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, that's great.
And just let me say that Andrew, he's the one why I came to the Anglican faith. I mean, I was already a Christian, but that's why I'm trying to seek virtue. Him and Max is actually talks to me a lot on his account. And so I just want to thank you. I feel like I'm a better person. I just want to be humble. I joke around, but in all seriousness, I'm just a person. I'm just trying to do my best in life. So I see a really good question that Andrew just posed. So I want to just say this: isn't it greater to overcome suffering than never suffer at all? Because we all have some form of suffering. So yeah.
I think suffering is a basic condition in the world. We're all going to suffer at some point. We all are going to lose loved ones or something like that.
Well, can I answer this real quick?
Go for it.
Sure. Yeah.
I suffered a lot in my car accident. I was in a coma for a month. I was given no hope, and this was neurologist, specialist in the field. I was care flighted, brought back to life numerous times. Had to learn how to walk and talk again. Everything. It's been a long struggle. I was before my car accident. I was like the best at sports, the smartest, I think God has made me a better person. I would not want to redo it, because I know in the resurrection I'll get my body and mind and everything about me that has weaknesses or things like that will be restored. So I think suffering has made me a better person.
Yeah, I think so. I think suffering just in general makes people more humble and more appreciative of what they have and what gifts that are out there. And I think they say that you should have some gratitude every day. Try to be thankful for something that happens.
Yeah.
So I'm also seeing, oh shoot, where did that go? I just lost something that G-Man was talking about intelligent design. If you guys had to pick an argument for God, aside from the resurrection, because I actually think one of the most powerful arguments is Jesus's resurrection, but if you had to pick something else, would you pick would you go to intelligent design, or do you think the cosmological argument would be more effective? Which one do you think would be the strongest to bring to an atheist?
Craig?
The strongest argument that I think, I don't think any of them quite work as proofs as framed. They're close. They get you like 70% of the way there, but they don't actually function as proving to someone God exists. The strongest possible one I've seen isn't that strong, but it can get you there. It's Phaser's, I think it's 4, Argument from Eternal Truth. It's off of either Aquinas or, not Aquinas, who's the guy from Africa? The other guy, not Aquinas, but the other. Yes, Augustine. Yes, exactly. It's either Aquinas or Augustine. But Phaser's 4th proof is called the Argument from Eternal Truth. Now, it doesn't work as a proof. That's the problem. It needs to be rejiggered because he says, basically the argument is that there's such things as mathematical truth. And it's really complicated why this is good, but the idea that there are laws of nature and mathematical laws and there are predetermined, it kind of works off intelligent design because you kind of need to account for this. And it doesn't work as a proof, though. It only works as an inference. This kind of alludes to the idea that there is a God. I'm not quite sure that made complete sense. So
no, those are good. I haven't read. I need to read Phaser, and I also see Himsake is saying the Marshall Perry argument from DNA Code, and Frank Christian is saying Bible prophecy, and I like both of those too. And I actually haven't read Marshall Perry, but I've DNA Code I think is a very good argument, and I've heard John Lennox make some good comments on that.
Yeah, I think that the best one is you mix them all together, and it's called the I don't know. There's somebody had a video out about it. It's called like the I forget. It's like the something C.
Well, I tell you what, listen to David Wood. I'm actually going to, here's my next video, what I'm planning to do, since I know, again, David Wood says we can mirror his stuff. I'm going to go mirror some more of his stuff. But David Wood said, I listened to 3 of his debates, and his opening statements, his first 15 minutes were incredible. And he did cover a whole bunch of different arguments like that. And so I think I'm going to put all those up there. And then
cumulative
maybe
case.
we can, you guys, maybe
case.
there's a debate with David Wood and Michael Shermer. I would love to do that with you guys. If anyone wants to watch that debate and we can do commentary on it, I thought it was amazing.
That'll be great.
Yeah,
cumulative case is taking all of them as a totality. And then because none of them quite work on their own, if you put them all together, though, you start to get a really compelling picture that, combined with coherentism.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
That's the cumulative case apologetic. I love that. That's what I presented to Dr. Oppie. When I was dialoguing with him, it wasn't really a debate. It was more of a dialogue. I'll be doing the same thing with Stephen Law. He teaches at Oxford, or I believe it's Oxford. He debated William Lane Craig, and I don't know if it'll be on MDD or SJ's channel, but that should be fun. And cool. I'm looking forward to that. It was going to be me and Andrew, but I'm not sure if Andrew has something come up. But it'll be fun. But I'm not sure if I'm an advocate of intelligent design. But to say that things have that phenomena has ends, like natural predispositions towards things, like water in freezing temperature. What is the end? It's to freeze, right?
Right.
We don't work in the sciences. We don't work on just efficient causes. We presuppose final causes or teleology that phenomena has certain ends. So I don't think you have to go as far as to be an intelligent design advocate. Just looking at science, you can see that we can't make sense out of it unless we look at it like Aristotle and say that things have final causes. So efficient causes, just looking at observing things in the phenomenal world makes no sense unless we also assign some kind of things have natural tendencies or proclivities.
Well,
in them.
let's build on that, because I think what you're saying, you're saying it, but I don't think it's quite that clear the way you're saying it for the audience to sort of comprehend what you're meaning. But I think what you're saying, if I could just try to steel man you, it's what I think you're saying is, I think you're looking at the argument from the uncaused cause, and the idea that if we look at life, each form of life has a cause from before it. So my parents gave birth to me, their parents gave birth to them, and it keeps going back and back and back. And we realize that now that we know that the universe has a start date of time, space, and matter, that the buck had to stop somewhere. So we had to have a cause that was immaterial, eternal, and metaphysical, basically, to have started this caused universe that keep progressing after that. So just going back to the unmoved mover or the uncaused cause, I think those two arguments are quite powerful.
Yes, but you have to remember, you don't have to find a point where the universe began to exist. That's why Andrew and I, think that Kalam is the weakest of the cosmological arguments, even though we think it's plausible. Ed Feser, who we both have read, thinks it's a hierarchical cause, which keeps all of the causes, the finite or temporal causal sequences into existence, something that's pure actuality. So
let's go. Let me ask you guys this. I'm going to ask you questions that I've seen coming from the audience going back to street epistemology, because I want to ask you, if we did a role play and I were to ask any of you if you want to answer this, I'll just say, so how do you know that your faith is the one that is superior? How do you know Christianity is the God that you should choose over the other 2,999 gods that are out there? I get asked a lot that. So how do we know that it's Christianity? How are we so sure that it's not Zeus or anyone else?
This atheist meme doesn't have the pop you think it does. Atheism means the rejection.
No, but answer that question. So how do you know it should be Christianity over Hinduism or Buddhism or some other faith?
Well, I don't believe, I believe there's truth in all religions, but I believe that truth came and dwelt among us 2,000 years ago, and that Jesus claimed to be divine, be the only person, and gave proof of this, an empirical proof. So if you just look at the overall case, not just the resurrection of Jesus, but how it has transformed history, I would say, it's plausible. It's plausibly true, and I would not say that Hinduism is wrong or is completely wrong. I would say it has some of the truth, but the fullness of truth, and this is in line with what C.S. Lewis said, the fullness of truth resides in the person of Jesus. That's actually a good answer. But for example, one version of Hinduism, if you take Brahman, I'll just say this real quick and then I'll answer the question for you. Sorry, Steph. If you take Brahman, there's two versions that Hindus practice. It's either being, Brahman is a being like a god, or Brahman is an energy force. But if you strip away Christianity and just talk about Yahweh, the attributes of Yahweh and the attributes of Brahman, they're completely identical. So the Hindu prophets, when they were writing their religious texts, were either fellowshipping with the living God, or there's a God template inside of people. It's just very similar to what he said, that there's truth in almost all of these religions. When spiritual people start trying to work this stuff out, they come to a lot of similar conclusions. What's the question, Steph? I'm sorry.
No, I think both of you are addressing that very well. So I think Josh was focusing on Jesus Christ, and I think you're just offering an example of how related Hinduism is to Christianity. And
right. Well, if I had spiritual experiences in India, I'm relatively certain that I would ascribe it to Brahman. If they were even identical spiritual experiences to the ones I have, I would probably be some sort of freaky Hindu. So it's not totally, I mean, people have spiritual experiences, and the spiritual experiences, I talk about this a lot on my channel, they're knowable, they're studied, they're real, people actually have them. It's the language that we ascribe to them, you can't really get out of the box of the culture that you're raised in, because the religious iconography is the language of the unconscious mind. So you born in India, you're not necessarily, you could have a similar experience. You know, my Christianity is 100% real to me. I could have a similar experience in India, and then I go interact with my friends or whoever, and they'll tell me that's Brahmin, you know, here's what, you know what I'm saying? It's like, they're not necessarily as far apart as people think they are. I don't know if that made any sense. Does that make sense?
No, I think that's one of the things that actually C.S. Lewis addressed that in one of his children's books. There was a character basically who had been worshiping the wrong God and suddenly came to realize that Aslan was the true God and started appreciating Aslan. And so they just had this character who spent his whole life worshiping a different God. And so I think there's probably some truth to that for Hindus who maybe never encountered Jesus. And then I would think,
right. But when they're like religious people, and they have like a Hindu poet like Rumi, who was like the Shakespeare of Islam, when he starts writing about God in his poems, if I put the Psalms side by side with what he's writing in his poems, you wouldn't be able to know the difference. Yeah, he's saying it's Allah sometimes, but when he's just talking generally God, you know, the sun shines in the morning, God made this. It's identical. There's no real that big of a difference. I'm still not sure that made sense. But
no, you both are making sense. I want to go back because I see Pinecreek's asked this, and Brian Stevens is also commenting on this, but they want to know, go back to Josh and say, what is the main reason that you're putting your fullness of your trust or truth in Jesus Christ? What's the main reason for focusing on Jesus, for him being the fullness?
Well, who he claimed to be, but I always give a cumulative case in that Christianity explains different facets of our experience, our spiritual, our existential dilemma, the a long historical tradition, the reasonableness as it, you know, partakes in the classical tradition of philosophy from Aristotle and Augustine and Plato, and I think you can't see you can't just isolate these things. This is what the street epistemologist is hoping for. You have to look at it in a wholeness way. You have to take into account, you know, all the different facets of reality, at least as you can perceive them. I'm sure there's lots of, you know, areas we're blind to. I'm sure that's the case, but at least what we do know is that Christianity meets all the criteria of truth. It's livable. It corresponds to reality. I agree. And it meets the dictates of common sense also.
So let's go back, and I want to present a couple of arguments that I've heard from David Wood. Actually, I think David Wood also, just building on what you've said and what Craig have said, talking back about Jesus. Why did we pick Jesus? David Wood is a psychopath. Apparently, he unfortunately was in prison for a long time. When he was young, he tried to kill his dad with a hammer.
What? This is the apologist guy?
Yeah, and so
wow.
He did all this kind of stuff, and he what was I just going to say? So he was a psychopath, and then he came to Christ because he thought to himself, he actually started looking at evidence for the historicity of Jesus, and he looked at evidence for the resurrection. But he also said, wait a second, there's a guy like me, a psychopath, a person who's just the horrible, worst person on the planet. I have no chance without someone like Jesus. And he realized that out of all the different gods out there, Jesus was the only one who basically was out there dining with the prostitutes and helping the poor and serving with the weak. And he realized that a guy like him could be best served with a person like Jesus. And I think that was a really powerful argument. But I also want to add another argument that he also made in a different thing. And Hugh Ross is built on something similar to this. But if you look at this idea of the Muslim God, for example, is transcendent to the universe, and the pantheist God or the Hinduist God is immanent within the universe, and the Christian God is both transcendent and immanent, and that's the only one that's really explained by science when you look at cosmology and the Big Bang.
That's pretty interesting.
Christianity explains different facets of reality. I mean, if you're looking at reality, through like a street epistemologist, you're looking at reality through a low-level lens. You're not looking at it through a high-level lens. If you're looking at reality at the stars from a low-level telescope, everything will be blurry, and you'll see all religions. But all religions are similarly false. But if you look with common sense and how it explains all these different facets of reality, really get into the dirt of history and philosophy, then you're going to look at it anew. And like C.S. Lewis says, it's what is that quote? It's because I can see all things anew through Christ, or something like that. But it depends on your perspective and how you're looking at reality. If you're just looking at reality through, pure reason in what we already know, and just trying to play word games, as a street epistemologist would say, using superficial skepticism, then, no one wants that. So when you step back and have humility, you're going to take all of the evidence from phenomena to perception, our cognitive abilities, so forth and so on, into account. And I think Christianity has provided the most satisfactory answer throughout the ages.
Well, I love what Stephanie just said too, because like if you take, let's just say that God is the idea in Allah, that's a transcendent God, and in Hinduism that's an immanent God. But see, that's the revelation in Christianity, is that it's a transcendent God that you can interact with, and it gives a human face to the transcendent. I mean, that I love how you just said that. I thought that was totally cool.
Yeah, I didn't. That's not my own unique idea. I got that from people like you, Ross, and David Wood. So I thought that was
but
great.
that totally works for me, because that's like in the Old Testament, the unique. There's a part of God in the Old Testament that I compared to Hinduism that's very, very similar to a lot of God concepts all over the world. And then there's the part that's unique to the Old Testament, and that's he's relatable. You can pray to him in person and even petition him to do things. Like there's a part where Abraham starts saying, don't destroy this. If there's five people in what is it, Sodom, will you 5 righteous people, will you not destroy the city? And Moses does the same thing. You can petition God to change his mind, so he's relatable and he's interactive. And then, as it reaches its fulfillment in Jesus, it's God becomes the incarnate God and man. But, go ahead.
And something else. I was thinking of Jesus praying and calling God Abba. Him living the epitome of what it means to be virtue, living a virtuous life. He takes God, our understanding of God, the abstraction from transcendence, and relates it to human language, that we can communicate with God. But even more than that, relates it to language about a father, about a dad, calling him Abba, and relating how virtue and closeness to God can relate. So that's a virtue ethic right there. That is something we can live by, and also, if God is infinite, which the classical tradition teaches, and we're finite, and we can never bridge that gap, the fact that Jesus would come down and interact with this creation through the Logos bridges that gap.
Right.
That's something unique in human.
It's making the transcendent deeply personal and real and human, so that you can interact freely with the divine. I mean, totally. Yes. Totally cool.
Yeah,
I don't know if it answered the question, but I
think you everybody said some interesting feedback here. I'm trying to see with the chat if anybody wants to build on that. I don't know if they do. They were asking, I've seen a conversation going back and forth between Brian Stevens and others about evolution and the evidence for that. And so that could be.
Brian, by the way, I want to go back. Tell Dan to have me back on Truth Wanted, Brian. You mentioned that last time. I want to do it again. He,
Yeah,
he,
and
has, he hasn't
Messenger
invited me.
reveals, I'll look for your email too. I just want to mention that.
By the
So
way,
you were on
I
a channel with Brian?
No. Last time we were in this chat, well, I think with the Kanye, it was no, it was before Kanye West. He said you should go back on Truth Wanted. Objectively, Dan is a street epistemologist. He was a disciple of Anthony Magnabosco. Just to tie it back to street epistemology, we're not talking about it anymore. But I was on the show with him, Truth Wanted, and Brian said that I should go back on the show. I was like, yeah, I'd love to go back. It's an atheist show, Stefan. It streams off of, it's ACA, it's Atheist Experience. He's an offshoot of Atheist Experience. I guess it was.
Yeah, no, I think I saw you on that. That was a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely think I saw you on that. That's
I owned it. People call up, they'd be like, I'm not sure I believe in God. I'd be like, Kalam. What? I said Kalam.
I got something.
Cause. Oh, I never thought about it. Yeah, I know you never thought about it. Let's think about it now. Okay, go ahead.
I got something for you. First of all, I want to say Brian Stevens, I really like him. We
he's
talked
cool.
before. Yeah. Such a cool guy.
He's a good egg atheist.
Well, I like him.
Opposed to a bad egg atheist.
he wants to point out that he's not the same Brian Stevens that Craig debated on Twitter, and then he wrote no joke.
Yeah, I know. I caught that. I thought I clarified that. Yes, I saw you wrote that in the thing. I realized it's a different person. Totally.
Brian was on Twitter a while ago and he quit. He got off Twitter.
Yeah, well, probably a good move, right? Probably like 1,000 times more peace of mind now. I'm not going crazy 50 times a day.
Yeah. I was also going to say, I hear a lot of people talking about evolution. The more I read and learn about Aristotle and the classical tradition, the more I'm convinced evolution is the greatest single argument for the existence of God than anything could come up with.
Checkmate. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I listened to David Wood in another debate with a Muslim woman who had become an agnostic, and I forgot her name, something like Haina, I think it was. And at the very end of the debate, they were debating how long it would take for us to evolve from amoebas, basically, and the time it would take far exceeds the time that this universe has been around. So,
yeah,
far exceeds it according to the odds.
I never was. You're talking about young Earth creationism?
No. I'm talking about old Earth going back 14 billion years. And when they talk about the time it took for us, I mean, just the what was needed for RNA to start self-replicating and that sort of thing, it would take much more time than we actually have had here on this planet. So we've had 4.5 billion years on the planet. And so
I don't even use those type of arguments. The very fact that evolution can occur anywhere or did occur anywhere, that's the best argument you can get, because it shows that nature has certain tendencies to produce life. Why is that? It has a goal. It's final causes. That's Aristotle's final causes. Now, if it has a goal, how does it have a goal? You have to answer that question. It's something exists outside of the pure phenomena. And indeed, like I said earlier, we cannot even do science without final causation.
Yeah. And I think I could say, if you look at the goal process, but I also look at how simple evolution is. It's basically just talking about survival of the fittest and the most adaptable. And it doesn't really explain our much deeper callings and our aesthetic apprehension, for example, or our desire for logic and desire for reasoning and rationality and consistency. That stuff clearly is not something that you would find in, say, a monkey. So weird.
Well,
so
evolution,
how did we get these desires and that kind of stuff? Yeah. I feel like that's because we're in the image of God.
It is. Well, life is an important thing. But evolution would be the material or the formal cause. The final cause would be, God having the end that we should be created, or that evolution should produce and culminate in producing life and complex life. Look, this is Ed Feser. This is Aristotle. This is the classical tradition. The more I read about William Lane, or the more I read about Feser and Aristotle, their arguments are and this is my opinion, their arguments are different and in the classical tradition and more complex than a lot of the arguments you've seen from William Lane Craig, even though he does give great arguments for the existence of God also.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, you guys, I'm wondering, we're almost coming up on, gosh, over an hour and a half. So I'm thinking we should maybe start tying this up and then think about we'll come back next time and maybe go over David Wood's debate with Michael Shermer. I think that would be pretty awesome. And I know we won't get
Can we also do a Tom Holland thing?
Yes, I'd love to do that too. So
absolutely.
And I think, as far as I know, Justin Brierley's okay with us mirroring his stuff too. But I think I'm going to go ahead and ask in advance and see if I can't get his permission.
Yeah, just so we never get another. Yeah,
I don't like that content violation.
And here we were talking. We were praising Kanye West. We were praising Joel Osteen even. And then those skanks struck us down. It's like, what on earth are you guys thinking about? We were PR men for them, basically. And like, no, you can't use our stuff. And made himself look bad. We are saying, I don't think he's greedy. I think it's a legitimate conversion. I think he's doing it because he really found the Lord.
I agree with you. Hey, I want to give Gavin Hurlman a shameless plug. He says 8:30 this Friday, he's debating Schuyler Fiction on Modern Day Debate.
I thought it was tonight. Or didn't you
no,
say
tonight. Tonight is actually going to be Adam's
Gavin. Gavin switched it to tonight. He's not in the chat, right?
No, Gavin's on Friday. Okay, Gavin's in the chat. And tonight, actually on Modern Day Debate is at 9:30, if they didn't change the time yet, is Adam Friended. And he's debating objective morality with Schuyler Fiction and Josh.
That should be good.
Totally interesting. And I kind of hope Adam Friended wins that one. Sorry, Schuyler, if he's listening.
Well, that should be an interesting debate. Me and Andrew are supposed to be at some point. It's been postponed a few times. Supposed to be debating and dialoguing with Adam Friended and his friend Twitch.
Yeah, you should do that. I want to get on there with Sitch and Adam on Sunday because they do these. Actually, here's what we need to do, guys. We need to establish something on a regular basis where we have this channel.
Right here.
Yeah. I love Wednesdays, except for, this is perfect for me time-wise. This is absolutely perfect. Starting when we did today, if you guys want to do this. But I know that next week we have Christmas and the following week is New Year's Day. Although I could do it New Year's Day, but Christmas wouldn't work. But if you guys want to start working it out every Wednesday, I would like to do things where we can start watching debates and doing stuff like that and try to, and I would do it on your channels too. Good. You guys figure out a time on your channel. I don't know, Dunstan, if you're going to get a channel or Andrew's back on here, but if you guys want to set up something on a particular time, which we would do in almost all examples unless we have something booked at that same time. So,
well, yes, I don't have a channel, but Andrew does. He does all of that. But I would love to be on your channel again or his channel. So yeah, it sounds cool.
Great. Well, thank you. And I want to say thank you to everybody, Messenger Reveals and Susan and Ken and Brian and Jesse Camping, all kinds of great people here in the crowd. So this has just been wonderful. So how can we reach you guys? How are people going to find you? And I don't know if Andrew's still on here, but he's Stratelites, STRATELATES at Twitter. So
yes, he left. He had to go do some things. We need to pray for him. We need to keep each other in prayer, and because we're all in this together. And I'm practicing virtue. So if you're listening to this, let's all pray for each other. But yeah, I'm just on Twitter under St. Dunstan. You can reach me there.
Awesome. Okay. Craig?
Come watch
I've got a link to your channel already set up in here in the description so people can go there.
Cool. Craig Reed, TCR. And then, you can find me on Twitter if you want. But watch the videos. Craig Reed, TCR.
So TCR, I know that what it stands for. It's either the Christian response or the cool, rational. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's the Christian response. I hyphenated it because I was convinced that it was negatively affecting the algorithm. I don't know if that's correct, but it's just
Oh.
something that entered my mind.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I'll have to figure
Yeah.
that out. Well, listen, guys, thank you so much. I
The
appreciate
cool
it. This
realist. Go ahead.
realist. And Ginger Ale and Frank Christian and Brian Stevens, everybody I've seen here, Gavin, just thank you guys all and Nathan, thank you everybody for showing up. We're going to try to run these on Wednesdays with the exception of next week. Merry Christmas, everybody. And
Merry Christmas.
keep
Merry
trying to do this.
Christmas.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and end the
Thanks.
stream.
And